Welcome to the Gavel. I am Terry Ikumi. Now, Parliament is still on break as lawmakers go through their party's primaries. And so far, there have been quite some upsets, which suggest that we would have a large number of first-timers in the 10th Assembly. However, some old lawmakers from the 8th Assembly are likely to make a return after winning their primaries. But away from the politicking, this week on the Gavel, we look at Parliament's contribution to fostering the nation's growing democracy through these trying times. My guest is the Executive Director of the Civil Society Legislative Advocacy Center, CISLAC, Awal Rafsanjani. And we begin by assessing the National Assembly as the 9th National Assembly winds down.
You cannot go to Oversight an agency and it is that agency that will give you transport, that will give you per diem, that will give you, what they call sitting allowance and all those kind of things. You have already compromised the integrity of that, oversight. And that is why National Assembly has a huge amount of resources at their disposal in order to carry out their oversight and their legislative activities without interference or without being diluted by either government agencies or even the private sector that they are supposed to check, what they are doing. But we have seen how many Nigerians have complained severally, including some of the government ministries and parastatals, where they see that sometimes it is alleged to be an extortion exercise, rather than ensuring that they follow the due process and ensure that the oversight also bring out silent issue gaps in terms of implementation of programs and even the law itself by the National Assembly, so that the National Assembly can take appropriate action to ensure that remedies are addressed. But those things are not there. And this is partly also because of the two problems. One has to do with also lack of the skill and knowledge to even carry out the oversight itself. When you go for oversight, what are you looking for? That knowledge gap happened or appeared in many of the National Assembly committee members. So when they go on oversight, there's no tangible ideas on what they are going for oversight for. The second problem has to do with the constituency project. Apparently, some National Assembly members have considered constituency project as even the main legislative work that they are brought or that they are voted to do. And this is because there's money involved in it. The amount of money that EFCC and ICPC have so far confiscated or compelled them to return is alarming. So when you deviate from your core responsibility as a legislator, and then you now turn yourself into just the only thing you focus for the year is to wait for the budget to come and slot in, what you call constituency project, which invariably you personalize it. It is a public fund given, to your constituency through you, but invariably this constituency project go around, you see that it has been personalized.
It's more like a campaign tool.
It is like a campaign tool. Secondly, many of these constituency projects that are being carried out, there's no conversation or discussion with the local government, so that by the time you are done with the National Assembly, whether you return or you don't come back, the sustainability of those projects can be continued. That collaboration and partnership with the local government and the state is not there. So therefore, we are not saying that the National Assembly should not have the right to point out or lobby projects in their constituency, but let it be done with a clear framework. They can, legislate. They are the lawmakers. They can legislate on how transparent, constituency projects should be done in Nigeria, so that it is no longer a personal thing and it is no longer just some pony.
That has come up a number of times while speaking with lawmakers.
But they have not legislated anything.
Exactly.
They should make the law for it.
So what I'm saying is that I've had this conversation with some of these lawmakers who insist that constituency project, whether you like it or not, is their personal project. like you said, they lobbied for it, so they would have to push through with it. But then your point about continuity, just in case you don't return, is very important. And there should be some form of distinction between constituency project and empowerment, so that at least your personal empowerment of your constituents should be different from the constituency project that goes into the budget. But then I'd like to take you up on something. So when you mentioned the oversight function, my attention shifted to the investigative hearings of some of the committees, some ad hoc committees set up to investigate certain things like the assets recovery, funds hidden in certain quarters, as well as specifically the Public Accounts Committee. These committees come out with a lot of revelations. So you'll find that they reveal that there are certain monies here, there are certain people who have moved about with certain monies who cannot account for them, but there's almost never an outcome for that. What exactly is the problem here?
Okay, first and foremost, the Public Account Committee leadership or chairman usually goes to opposition party in the legislature.
For fairness.
For fairness, and just to ensure that there's a more accountability, more rigorous and vigorous, meticulous, review of the expenditure. As a matter of fact, it's one of the either the first or the second most important committee if people take it serious, because it is about accountability. Unfortunately, that committee is seen as like a punishment in the National Assembly because they hardly have the enabling resources to be able to carry out their work. So whatever finding they come up with, it is not even given serious attention. Again, because of the fact that the Auditor General Office has become like an advisory office. So every year they conduct audits on how government officials are siphoning, diverting, stealing public taxpayers' money. They make their report. The presidency will just say, noted. The National Assembly will not be able to do anything because the National Assembly role is to investigate those things, and because they don't have the prosecuting power, they still gave it back to the executive, and the executive is not interested to do anything. Look at the various audit report that the Auditor General has given in the country. Look at the damning report that is coming, which included also National Assembly, because National Assembly also is part of the game. It's part of the violators of the financial, management system in the country as far as the auditor report is concerned. So the Public Account Committee, what they should have done is to ensure that they make sure that the Auditor General is empowered through legislation so that, his report or her report, the report of the Auditor General, will not just be seen as one of those reports like we do in NGO, because NGO do a lot of report, they give it to government. Government, they don't think that it is worth considering. Only in few cases where you have serious-minded government official, they say, okay, look, these people, what they are saying is true. How do we mainstream some of those things? So in some places, you see that the report of civil society are taken serious, but those who are determined to continue to destroy this country, those who are determined to continue to steal the country money, when NGO come up with their own report and recommend certain measures for the government to take, they see it like, you are disturbing us.
Okay.
Now, that's the same way they are also treating the Auditor General reports. Otherwise, you can imagine, how can you be fighting corruption? All these scandals are happening on yearly basis, and you did not think that you need to do something with the Auditor General report. They are not doing anything. If they are doing anything, they would have, I can assure you that 60 to 70% of the public looting and stealing would have been uncovered and would have been blocked. So the government itself It doesn't take the Auditor General report serious, despite the damning allegation of corruption and refusal to comply with the financial regulation in the country. So you lost it from that perspective. And the National Assembly, that is supposed to be a check on government, agencies and programs, and even the law itself, the committee has not been empowered to carry out its own, responsibility. And even the committee itself has not been proactive to push for having a legal framework on the office of the Auditor General of the Federation. If they have done that, I tell you that it will have been very easy even for the Public Account Committee in both the Senate and House of Representatives to detect fraud and all the aberration and the stealing that various government agencies are doing. They would have been able to detect it and ensure that people that are involved in it with the collaboration with the EFCC and ICPC are actually held to account.
Is it the National Assembly committees that are not properly carrying out their investigation? Or is it the executive arm of government that is refusing to implement the recommendations from the reports of the committees? Because to one extent, there are some of these committee reports that are never made public. So you don't know the outcome of certain investigations. I know there are a couple of committees that I have approached to find out certain details of their findings. You don't really get that, especially the Public Accounts Committee.
Basically, as you know, the National Assembly has no constitutional mandate to prosecute. But they can, investigate, they can do investigative hearing, they can do oversight, they can actually call for, memorandum and, organize even physical public hearing for people to come and give testimony or to give position on how they think things should be. And that is why in the lawmaking, public hearing is provided so that public can come and make input and ensure that, because lawmaking cannot be left only to those people, even though they are the primary responsible for law making in the country, but they have the responsibility to also get input and views of Nigerians on how best the law should, be based on the expertise and based on the, experience and based on the, special skill they have on those, issues. So now where the problem comes is when there's a compromise. For example, public hearing was supposed to be, there were some special committees that were supposed to do public hearing. When they started and when, people were exposing fraud and things like this, from nowhere you hear that the thing has been suspended or had been in the interim stopped, and you will never hear anything again. That is one. Number two, the executive, sometimes they even made it openly. Additional, sometimes, one of the aides to the president said that the National Assembly, recommendation are just advice. Yes, to some extent, but no serious government will joke with a serious recommendation emanating from the legislature. The executive has a responsibility to ensure that when the National Assembly send in their report, they can review it and then see where they can actually, whether agree with them or be able to, improve on it. The idea is to have collaboration, and that is why collaboration is coming between the executive and the legislature. It is not the kind of collaboration that some people are seeing today, where it is like master and servant, where the legislature, if they speak, they are being seen as enemy. So we have reached a state that even ordinary chief executives of agencies have no respect and regard for the National Assembly, because they have also compromised by going there to beg them for assistance, for contract, for what have you. Once you begin to do that, they will not respect you. So this is the reason why some government agencies have no respect for National Assembly members, because they have already, compromised. They have gone to beg for small favor. They have gone to beg for contract. They have gone to beg for, a job. They have gone to beg for things that ordinarily they need to reserve. Because look, National Assembly, as a National Assembly, it is as good as you being an anti-corruption person, because your work is to expose corruption, block leakages.
Talk about the National Assembly, we'll talk about Parliament, and clearly, Parliament is perhaps the hallmark of every democracy. It's the bridge between the people and government. It's the arm of government that checks the executives, makes laws and all that. But in terms of democracy within Nigeria, a growing democracy like Nigeria, In your assessment of the National Assembly, how would you say that this parliament, if we need a bicameral legislature, many have questioned if we need that, how would you say that this parliament has fostered or has helped in fostering this our growing democracy?
Well, to be honest to you, if National Assembly members are to carry out their responsibility, their constitutional responsibility, I think we will need to have both the Senate and House of Representatives, but maybe with a limited number. We can think about the number of each constituent. Each constituency has, some number of House of Representatives,
yes.
And if we, because of the cost implication, we can actually do some reduction in terms of the number and also in terms of the cost associated with financing National Assembly. If we are able to do that, it's better to have the balance than to have a parliamentary system where the central government is the owner of the parliament. If you have that, unless you are lucky to have a very progressive executive, its ministers are drawn from the parliament, like what you see in Britain and other countries where they have parliamentary system. We are applying, presidential system, and that's why you have the Senate and House of Representatives. And the idea is to give a sense of belonging, sense of representation at various constituents, rather than just the government will now pick the ministers from the parliament. This time around, you have an independent legislature that can checkmate the excesses of the executive. In the case of parliamentary system, it is the same people. The minister belongs to the parliament. You understand? So there's limit at which, especially within the context of Nigerian, legislative or democratic governance, it will be extremely difficult for us to succeed when we have just parliamentary system where everybody will be from the same party. Even now, how did you manage? We have not been able to manage the diversity very well.
But
they'll crush you because the parliamentary system, if you are not lucky, the same party will dominate everything.
But in your opinion, when you look at how our democracy is going and the concerns that it's shaky at the moment, do you think the Parliament has done anything, or how far has Parliament gone in ensuring that at least this democracy stays strong?
The truth of the matter is that the kind of democracy we are operating and vis-a-vis the legislature that we have, particularly with the Ninth Assembly, Nigerians, rightly or wrongly, they have a perception that the leadership, especially in the Senate, had actually compromised its independence to the executive. It's been seen, this perception is being seen, rightly or wrongly, by many Nigerians as one of the reasons why the National Assembly is being seen to be docile. Secondly, this is the reason why Nigerians are saying that so many reckless approval are given. For example, the country perpetually continue to borrow money, and the National Assembly has fiscal responsibility law in place, which they continue to also ignore and violate it and continue to give this loan without actually even public hearing, because they have succeeded in plunging the country into a perpetual debt collectors. Secondly, you have also a National Assembly that, as a result of its over-loyalty, some of the executive agencies have no respect and regard for them. They will call them for public hearing or for investigative hearing or for meeting. They will not come. This is because they have already sold out their own independence and at least their ability to summon anybody. In fact, National Assembly can summon the president.
We saw them try a couple of times.
They can actually, but they cannot. This National Assembly, it is not possible to do that because, like I said, the perception Nigerians are having. So they need to do a lot to, improve the perception that Nigerians are having about them. And thirdly, Nigerians are also seeing many of the National Assembly members as chua-chua, people who just collect money for everything. So that perception also, they need to construct it if it is not what they are doing.
All right.
Partly, they need to show that they are really involved in the fight against corruption. As it is now, the National Assembly apparently have abandoned that ownership of even the effort they had made to even have the anti-corruption legal framework. As National Assembly, you made the law to create EFCC, ICPC, and all of them. But the National Assembly appears not to be seen to be even proactive. It's not just about the making the law, but making the law to work.
Mr. Rafsanjani, we're almost out of time. Let me just ask you this question just before we go. There are a plethora of issues that's facing this country, especially the current government, battling quite a number of issues, security, and but let me talk about this ASU issue now. You have talked about how the National Assembly could, make recommendations, and it doesn't work. But in this case of ASU, what do you expect that National Assembly should do, or what should the National Assembly have done to address this? Or does the National Assembly have any powers whatsoever to have addressed this issue?
The National Assembly has responsibility as a responsible lawmaker, as a responsible part of the tiers of government, to ensure that programs, agreements, and healthy educational system also works in the country. Now, they can encourage the executive to ensure that durable solution to our collapsing educational system are dealt with. I know that, occasionally, sometimes National Assembly members, they are concerned because they also, some of them are very worried and very progressive.
We've seen some meetings between
a lot of National Assembly members, I know that they are very concerned with the state of the nation, but they are handicapped. Handicapped in the sense that, you see, this executive is like, anything you do contrary is like you are an enemy. So some of the National Assembly members are also afraid that if they push too much, first, they will be denied ticket to come back. Secondly, if they have some little issue, they will send maybe anti-corruption agencies.
So it does seem clearly that regarding this ASU issue specifically, there is almost nothing that National Assembly can do.
No, National Assembly, like I said, they have been making efforts to ensure that at least this cogmare has been addressed. But unfortunately, but because this is the limitation of it's a constitutional limitation for them. So the only thing they are doing now is talking with the executive to see how the executive will do this. And when they then see some of the executive, they don't have regard and respect for them. But with all this romancing and the loyalty and the respect and the obedience that the leadership of National Assembly is doing to the executive, if they wake up today and if they are bothered about the deteriorating educational system, they wake up the speaker, the deputy speaker, the Senate president, the deputy Senate president, and all other principal officers, let them wake up to go and meet the president to say, sir, our children have been out of school and they have become agents of some politicians who are recruiting them for all sorts of criminal activities. The president has children, and he would, as a responsible Nigerian, patriotic Nigerian, he will reason with National Assembly to say, okay, whatever the problems, let us resolve it. And I think they had meeting recently in the Villa.
I don't know the impact of that. I'm trying to emphasize the powers of the National Assembly to at least explain to Nigerians how handicapped the National Assembly may be. Because we've seen this kind of engagement.
No, I'm just telling you, there's a constitutional limitation. They cannot take over the work of the executive.
The National Assembly has done its part, in quotes, to an extent, to try to address it. But it does seem like their hands are handicapped. Their hands are tied at this point.
And that is why I say this collaboration and partnership, loyalty, whatever they are doing to the executive has not produced positive results for the nation. Because if the National Assembly is able to assert itself, is able to show that a particular government agencies cannot disrespect, cannot ignore what has been agreed on, then they are able to achieve something. But
let's hope that the 10th, this assembly is virtually done. I mean, it's politicking the whole way now.
They still have 1 year. They still have 1 year to go.
That's an opportunity. This is their time to seek re-election, so you would hardly see them around. But let's hope that the 10th assembly.
That's my hope. So we need to encourage Nigerians to vote capable, responsible, competent lawmakers who can come and make life, easy for their, socio-economic progress.
Mr. Awara of Sanjani, thank you very much for coming to speak with us on the Gavel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, that's the Gavel this week. Send feedback to the Gavel at channelstv.com. Now, plenary resumes on the 7th of June. Goodbye. I'm Terry Ikumi.